It was a Friday night in the middle of August, a good few years ago now. I started the shift along with another lad, and it seemed like another unremarkable normal night. As always, I sent the other lad to the door, and I did what has always been my thing. Walk around the bar, check the fire exits, a quick toilet check, but most importantly, a customer check. This was followed by a bit of crack with some of the regulars and a quick laugh or joke with some out-of-towners to get a bit of rapport going, ready for the night's antics. Then, off to the door to get on with the job, as you do. It was a busy night, with around 300 punters in a venue that will hold around 350. A pretty standard night back in the day. There were mainly regulars at this point, mixed with a couple of small groups and a couple of large hen parties, mixed with the usual smattering of Scotsmen, who seemed to get everywhere. So all in all, it looked set for a pretty standard night. Now this was a decent venue, but like all bars and clubs in this day and age, we had to be on the lookout for drug abuse. It wasn't commonplace in this particular bar, but on the other hand, if I had £1 for all of those that I've caught having a cheeky line, well, you know the rest. As a matter of standard practice, we do something which most doormen do, regular toilet checks. I sent the other doorman downstairs to the toilets, and no sooner had he left, I got a radio call come through for assistance.
Hey man, I could use some assistance down here, there's something going on.
So down I went like a startled gazelle with all the grace of the Ark Royal. And sure enough, he had caught 2 Scottish lads having the cheeky line. As per the rules of the venue, they were both searched and neither of them had anything on them. Maybe half of Columbia up their noses, but nothing left on them. Following our normal procedures, we began to eject them from the venue. Now a thing I've always believed in, and still believe to this day, is that anyone who needs to be ejected should always be ejected straight out of the closest exit or fire exit. So, the first bloke that was with the other doorman, calm and meek as a mouse, walked out with no resistance given. He went down the stairs from the gents and straight out of the fire exit as directed. So what about the other one? Well, lucky me, I got the wannabe fighter. He had decided he didn't want to go. He chucked a punch which was deflected, and he was grabbed and promptly marched out, or as we like to say in the northeast, ragged out. I then went straight on the radio to let the other bars and police know what had happened, followed by a description of the lads. Pretty standard up to now, yeah? Well, this is where it starts to get interesting. We went back to the front door, and by now we had a lot of Scottish lads milling around just inside the bar. One of them got a phone call and looked straight at me. Instantly I thought, here we go, Mr. Wannabe must be on the phone to him. Oh, and how right I was. The telephone guy came over to me and started the usual,
Why did you chuck my 2 pals out? We've just come to meet him.
With a bit of a stance on him and a bit of an attitude. He had about 10 of his mates standing behind him, and me with 1 mate standing next to me. So I said to him, mate, come over here and let's have a crack on. So he came with me, and I explained what had happened, and I added, to be honest mate, they did okay for themselves. They didn't get caught with any gear. Your pal that threw a punch wasn't hurt, and they've just been chucked out the bar. Simple as. So, the bloke thought about it and said,
Oh, well, you can't take the wankers anywhere.
But still with that certain something about him that kept me on my toes and ready. A few minutes later he came back and started again with the standard,
Do you know who I am?
To which my reply has always been, well, if you don't know, mate, how am I meant to? He came with his mates behind him, like following the Pied Piper, and started to get aggressive. So I turned to the mouthpiece and said, look mate, your pals got caught snorting coke. They've been chucked out. You and your mates obviously have a problem with that, fair enough. But I'm doing my job, and if they didn't want chucked out, they shouldn't be doing drugs in my bar.
Hey, we've done nothing wrong. All you do is play.
By now we were at a bit of a standoff, 2 against 10. So I said, Look, lads, finish your drinks and get yourselves to another bar. You're not getting served here again. Just at that moment, I saw one of the older fellas who drinks in the bar hobble off with his stick out of my peripheral vision, and I knew where he was going. Over the next few minutes or so, the lads got more and more aggressive, and their stances and tones changed. At that point, I knew what to expect. Just then, the two lads that run the door on the bar up the street came walking down into my bar, thanks to the old bloke. The Scotsman started and all hell was let loose, punches flying the lot. I managed to get hold of Mr. Mouthpiece, who was a big old lump, in a Nelson and began dragging him out. What the hell happened to me next, I don't know. But he somehow flipped me, and the next thing I knew, I was on the ground with Mr. Mouthpiece and his mate punching and kicking me. At this point, I was throwing punches as hard and fast as I could. The pub manager, unbeknown to me, was running over to help, not really knowing what to do, but his heart was in the right place. He ran over and grabbed my right hand, trying to pull me up. Meanwhile, the blows from Mr. Mouthpiece and his mate were still raining down on me. Well, what happened next couldn't have been avoided. I still had a left hand, and I had no choice but to throw a left hook at the manager to get him off my hand. I honestly didn't know it was the manager. I then somehow got one of the Scottish lads off me with a combination of punches and kicks, but Mr. Mouthpiece still wouldn't give up. I managed to get halfway up, but he still had the massive advantage of both position and size. All of a sudden, a customer who, as it happens, was an ex-doorman, ran over and swiped Mr. Mouthpiece, totally poleaxing him, and then sat on him. He shouted over to me,
Go on then, lad. Get stuck in and have fun. I'll hold this fucker for you.
I saw at the other side of the bar the lad who worked for me pinned to the floor. I ran over and got the aggressor in a chokehold, pulled him backwards and applied just the right amount of pressure to safely put him to sleep. I turned my attention to one of the lads from the bar up the street, taking two more Scotsmen out in headlocks. He had one under each arm and two more Scotsmen coming at him. Me and my mate ran at them and managed to drag them back. But there was one more Scotsman. He was a real mountain of a man. He ran from the double headlock melee. Just outside of the bar, as in many, there were some large, heavy, false palm trees. Well, you can guess what the mountain man was going to do next. He picked up one of the trees with sheer dumb strength and started to raise it as if to hit the bouncer with it. I could see all this unfolding before me, but couldn't do anything as I was still fighting to get one of the nutters out. Then I saw out of the corner of my eye, like an avenging angel, something which is now local folklore. The shot girl from a bar round the corner was walking past on her way to work, and she stands at 5 feet tall on a good day. She ran at the mountain man and somehow managed to latch herself around his neck. She was shouting, "I don't think so, mate," and punching him. She cracked him right in the face and made him drop the tree. This was an amazing sight to see. Just then, the sirens started in the distance, and some of the Scotsmen ran off shouting the usual threats.
Hey, we've done nothing wrong. All you do is try to cause a wee bit of trouble just because we're Scots.
The police turned up and arrested those that were left. As one of them was getting manhandled into the back of the van, he shouted,
The other 50 lads will be here tomorrow. They'll be in to see you.
To which I replied, "Course, mate, looking forward to it. Sleep well in your cell." Thinking at the time it was just the usual crap. The rest of the night then passed, as it sometimes does, uneventfully, apart from an interesting chat with the manager about the punch in the face that he received from me. Oh, and the mountain of paperwork and incident logs, as is now the way. The next day arrived, and it was a pretty standard sort of a Saturday. I woke up around 10 a.m. by the roar of my 3 sons staggering down the stairs like something that had just left the swamp, and had a bit of a chuckle to myself about the shot girl and the palm tree. I felt a bit achy, but not too worse for wear considering the previous night's antics. So, time marched on, and after a good day with the kids, off I went for the 3 S's: shit, shower and shave. I got my door clobber and boots on, ready to see what the night would bring. Well, was I in for a surprise? I can tell you what, even after all the years on the door, you just couldn't make up what that night was going to bring. I was back at my regular venue again for a 9 p.m. start, and I walked into a packed, and I mean packed, bar for this time of night. I was ready to sign in and get radioed up and whatnot. As soon as I set foot inside the bar, the most bizarre thing happened. I was more or less mobbed by Scotsmen.
Smile.
Rather than try and kick off, as I had expected, they started taking my photograph with their phones, and I could hear someone saying,
"That looks like the wee bastard there."
Shocked, I said, "What the hell are you playing at here, lads?" The group was easily 40 to 50 strong. No answers were given, and they walked off back to their respective tables, some in the beer garden and some in the bar. Having at that point the old bouncer's belly feeling, I went into the office with the other lad, signed in and got my radio on. I then went back into the bar along with the other doorman. I heard one of the Scotsmen now saying,
"I've sent a photo over to see if it's him."
I knew exactly what the score was. It was the other 50 lads who were coming to the town today to meet the lads from last night. You know, the ones that I considered to be figments of the imagination. As I was having a quick word with the other doorman about the best course of action, 5 policemen started walking down the beer garden towards the door. The Scotsmen instantly started drifting out. The police were there purely and simply for what I term a walkabout, which considered normal in a busy area that's populated by bars and clubs. They tend to walk through the bar checking numbers, faces, etc. It's often a good help to us, as anyone that is up to no good, no matter if we are aware or not, usually just drift out. Before I could even mention my newfound stardom to one of the policemen, the Scotsmen all downed their pints and bottles and left. The rest of the night passed without any further problems, but I was expecting some trouble from these Scottish lads at the end of the night. I'd passed the word around the door staff at other venues, and a few times over the night I heard radio calls to the police about fights and drug taking, which to be honest wasn't unusual back then. I was thinking to myself that it was my little friends again. So the shift was over, paperwork was done, and it was time to leave the bar. I was expecting a remake of Rob Roy to take place, but all was quiet. Just as I was about to sign off the police radio, I heard a call from the one and only hotel in the area, where, unbeknown to me at the time, all of these Scotsmen were staying, asking for the police to eject some guests for criminal damage. Anyway, we left the bar and started walking down the street to make our way home through past the kebab and pizza shop. We saw around 30 or 40 men walking up the street with sports bags and suitcases in hand. My Scottish friends from before, obviously just evicted from the hotel. One of them came up to me, slightly worse for wear on drink and God knows what else. He didn't recognise me. He said,
"Here, pal, look at this."
He showed me a video on his phone of them turning on all of the taps, filling up all the sinks and baths and letting them overflow to flood the hotel. Obviously, this was the criminal damage that I heard on the radio. Anyway, the bloke with the video on his phone still didn't recognise me and said,
"Look, I have 600 quid here in cash."
And he pulled out a big wad of cash, dropped a couple of wraps of what I presumed to be cocaine, and asked me if I could arrange a 6-seated taxi to take him and 5 of his friends back up north of the border to Glasgow. This is when I had an idea to get a little revenge. "Yeah, mate, no problem. Give me 5 minutes and I'll arrange something," I said. The other doorman, shocked, said, "What are you doing? Let's just go before we're recognised." I knew that's what I should have done, but I couldn't resist the sweet taste of revenge that I was beginning to taste in my mouth. Now, all doormen know a taxi driver that they can ring on their mobiles. It's just part of the game. I put a call into a friend that happened to have a minibus that he used as a taxi, and after a quick chat, he was on his way to pick up some of my newfound friends. I told him that they had the cash, and he had to take the cash up front. When he got there, they all piled aboard, drinking bottles of lager and all kinds of other intoxicating stuff. I waited until they paid the driver, and off he went, with a twinkle in his eye. Half an hour later, I got the phone call I'd been waiting for. It had me in hysterics. Just as I had suggested they might, with all they'd been drinking, they were soon caught short, just as the driver had drove as far as the A1.
Hey, I need a piss. Hey, pull over.
On a dark, quiet, desolate stretch of the A1 just north of Newcastle, the driver pulled into a lay-by. One by one, they staggered off the minibus to relieve themselves in the bushes.
Get out of my way. Can you wait to piss? Get off my feet. You can piss your pants the way you're going.
The second the last one was off the minibus, you guessed it, the driver's foot was flat to the floor and off he flew up the A1 with the door still open, leaving them all with their mouths open and mid-piss. At the next lay-by he stopped, dumped the luggage and emptied bottles and a decent-sized bag of coke all over the ground and headed for home. We earned a 3-way split on the taxi fare for him, me and the other doorman. Sometimes you've just to see how things pan out in this game and smile.